their job is to follow the orders of their donors. God damn. And so, yes, we are.
I'm being told that there are news. It says disregard evacuation warning. It was for Kenneth Fire only.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, as we're doing this segment live, we get a perfect example of the incompetence of leadership in LA. Earlier in the show, the giant warning goes off. All of you heard it. It was an evacuation order. And so, I'm closer to the fires. So I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And then I find out it was for all of LA, which makes no sense because Brett doesn't live anywhere near the fires, right? So now they just said, here, I'll read it to you. Disregard last evacuation warning. It was for Kenneth Fire only. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Incompetence through and through.
Devastating wildfires and high winds continue to ravage the Los Angeles area, killing at least 2 people and causing thousands of others to flee. Tens of thousands of people are currently under evacuation orders across LA County, and as of now, the fires are 0% contained. The high winds in the area have made battling the fires nearly impossible for firefighters, and unfortunately, it doesn't appear that they'll be able to make any kind of progress until those winds die down. As of last night, winds were still reaching 90 miles per hour, which for context is the equivalent of a very strong Category 1 hurricane. And today they're still seeing gusts of up to 50 miles per hour. Pilots have been doing their best to fight the fires from the sky, but the winds have thwarted all of their efforts. According to Brent Pascoa, a battalion chief for the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, he said it's really unsafe for the pilots to be flying in the canyons when the winds are that high. We're hopeful that they'll die down, but we have to be optimistic at this point. Emergency workers have been working nonstop, with many firefighters working for over 24 hours straight, but Los Angeles County is simply not equipped to deal with fires of this incredible scope. And speaking of scope, the Eaton fire has consumed over 10,000 acres as of yesterday, and the Palisades fire has burned through 5,000 acres. To aid in the firefighting effort, the Department of Defense is sending help by order of President Biden. According to the Pentagon, both the California and Nevada National Guards are adding 2 modular air firefighting system units, and 10 Navy helicopters with water delivery buckets are being sent to help with aerial suppression. So this is obviously horrifying to witness. Even in areas where the fires aren't direct threats to the people or property, power outages and water shortage problems are happening all over Southern California. I am not in California right now, but John, you are, and our friends are out there. We have more on this story, but can you tell us a little bit of how things are over there?
Yeah, so obviously, myself and my family, we've been following it very closely. There's been concern that this could be the fire that breaks through into what people consider more like, LA proper. Like everybody knows, even if you're not close to California, that California has struggled with wildfires for some time. This year, there have been fires throughout California, but it had seemed up until this point like a bit of a lighter season. And I think maybe, at least for me, I sort of put my guard down. I thought that we had kind of gotten through it, and now all of a sudden, these absolutely devastating fires sprout up in the northwest and northeast of LA. They don't often seem to get quite this close. But the interaction of the winds, as you said, absolutely insane winds, with the fact that we didn't have the amount of precipitation leading up to this period that you might expect in an average year with California has just been a bad combination. And the wind in particular means that not only does a fire spread much more quickly, but also it's capable of sending embers off for an extended distance and starting up new fires. And so we've seen quite a bit of that. And so that's been sort of the concern in Santa Monica and even in Culver City, that the possibility that far from where we consider the main borders of the fire to be, that you could all of a sudden have one sprout up. And so the concern is pretty widespread throughout the area. Well, where we're at, It's quite far. Obviously, you can see the massive smoke cloud hanging over the city. The air is really bad. Like myself and my family, we're all like heavily congested and everything. And so I imagine for kids, people with, respiratory issues, maybe a lot of people coming out of COVID that might have somewhat impaired respiratory systems, it's obviously dangerous for them too, even if they're not that close to the fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about whenever you think of, the air quality is bad, how that can really directly impact people and their families. And you were talking earlier about how bad the wind is. Part of the issue with the wind also is that these planes are dropping things from the sky, hoping to help put out the fires. But before it can even hit the ground, the winds are just blowing them out of the way. So nothing is getting down. That's why they're at a 0% containment rate right now. But there's more of this story, because whenever there is a natural disaster, people always want to point a finger at someone. Many people are blaming Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass for cutting $17 million from the LA Fire Department's budget while increasing the police budget by $126 million. This is a graphic that was shared by the LA City Controller. And the caption there reads, "The decrease for the fire department was the second largest cut to come out of the budget." However, it has been reported that she actually wanted to cut $23 million from the fire department. Whether or not that amount would make that much of a difference regarding a disaster of this scope, who's to say? We don't know. But to make matters worse, Bass isn't even in LA right now. She is in Ghana. On X, she posted a message to her Angelenos saying, "Our LAFD and LAPD HQ teams continue to work overnight to protect Angelenos affected by fires in LA. Angelenos should be advised that the windstorm is expected to worsen through the morning and to heed local warnings, stay vigilant, and stay safe." Thank you very much. That was not remotely helpful. And understandably, her comment section is lit up with her angry constituents who feel that they've been abandoned. Meanwhile, President-elect Trump is blaming California Governor Gavin Newsom for the fires, arguing that back in 2020, Newsom blocked a Trump order that would have diverted water from the northern part of the state, specifically from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, to the drier southern part of the state. Newsom cited environmental issues when blocking Trump's order, and the two leaders failed to reach any kind of consensus on the issue. In September of last year, Trump promised that if he was elected president in November, he would block aid to California for wildfire relief, just to stick it to Gavin Newsom. Perhaps unsurprisingly, though, Newsom was able to work with the Biden administration on the issue. And while Southern California is obviously very dry, the water situation in LA has actually been better. It is actually better now than it has been in so many years. So Trump's ire might be a little bit misdirected, but perhaps the most misdirected of all is Don Jr. He posted this on Truth Social today asking, can we rename DEI to DIE? Since that's what seems to happen to the people downstream of those who place woke virtue signaling far above competency. So I don't even know what he's on about. I assume that maybe he's mad that the mayor of LA is a woman of color, even though the mayor is voted on democratically and is not appointed by anyone. But the fact that he didn't even have to elaborate on that thought is annoying, because not because he didn't elaborate, but because he didn't feel that he needed to, right? He knew that if he just said something crazy, his followers would just fill in the gaps in their own minds and somehow make sense of it. John, I'll get your thoughts in a minute, but I just want to say that while it's tempting to blame individuals, even powerful individuals like the governor or the mayor or whoever, for massive natural disasters, there always is two sides to them. There's the disaster itself, and then there's the response to it, which is too often also very disastrous. Generally, I don't think finger pointing is helpful, although I will concede that the LA mayor tweeting from Africa while her city is on fire is problematic. But, wildfires are natural and normal. You said it yourself. There is a wildfire season, and Angelenos, I would expect, are used to some degree of wildfire. But, we're certainly seeing weather patterns across the country, across the globe, really, the scale and scope of which are unprecedented. And weather patterns are becoming more unpredictable. The jet stream is amuck, right? The oceans are warmer throughout the year. All of these things have massive repercussions across various aspects of life on this planet. And we can blame Karen Bass or Gavin Newsom or wokeness or whatever. but we're not going to get to the root of the issue in doing so. And even if we did, getting to the root of that issue isn't going to do much to help those who are currently watching their city burn. And we can only hope that adequate resources are allocated where they will be most helpful, and that people are able to get to safety. John, what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, see, what I just heard from you is why you're never going to be president, because all you did was talk responsibly about, the nuance of allocating blame. You didn't insult anyone. You didn't call anyone scum or anything. You didn't insult a fish like Donald Trump did on Truth Social.
I specifically left that part out of the story because I can't bring myself to say it. You can say it, though.
The worthless smelt. I hate that fish. Worst fish ever. Absolute utter nonsense from him. So look, with Karen Bass, if they had the $7 million or whatever, would it make a difference? I have no idea. Maybe a little bit, probably not that much. But if people want to draw from the fact that they cut that funding while massively increasing the police funding, that this is indicative of priorities, then I think they should certainly do that. What I find about Donald Trump so amazing is I saw he went right from a posting on Truth Social images of Canada as part of the U.S. to a bunch of messages about the fires. He didn't even pretend to care about the people being affected by it. There wasn't even like one message of, my thoughts and prayers, like a pointless message like my thoughts and prayers go out to the people whose homes are being burned, to those who've already died. None. It was instantly Gavin Newsom and conspiracy theories about fish and fire hydrants and whatever. And he attacked Biden, and that's it. That's all. By the way, he's already the guy that, I think you acknowledge this, already promised on the campaign trail, if they have fires, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to pre-abandon the people of California. Now, I know if you're a conservative listening to this, you think, well, a lot of those are liberals. Okay, well, forget about that. Who cares if they burn? He pre-abandoned California Republicans, of which there are many. It's not like it's 70% liberal up in here. A lot of these areas, particularly the areas that are burning right now, are very wealthy areas. There's probably tons of Trump fans up there. And he already told you, I'm going to let them burn, and I don't even care what happens. And the only thing I'm even going to do when it starts to happen is try to score points against Biden and Gavin Newsom because of DEI or whatever. I don't even understand what Don Jr. is talking about there, because Gavin Newsom and Joe Biden are like the whitest guys that have ever lived. They're straight white Christians. What more do you want out of them? But anyway, this incident, Donald Trump thankfully has very little to do with the reaction to this. So this is like the last fire season we'll have in California, where people who theoretically don't want the world to burn will be in charge. Unfortunately, next year it'll be him. And maybe they won't dispatch those assets. Maybe he'll be just as vindictive as he said. But this is the period that we're entering into. And for many conservatives in other parts of the country, it may be easy to write off California and its fires or whatever. But how do you think he's going to respond to, winter devastation, cold, blizzards and stuff in Texas, or hurricanes hitting, Florida or the East Coast or whatever? Like, you're going to have disasters too. How's he going to respond to tornado damage? How's he going to respond to, a train derailment or something? Like, is he going to care? Or is your area going to be sufficiently MAGA that he'll actually care, or will he just tweet a whole bunch about his grievances? Stay tuned, because you might get a chance to find out over the next 4 years.
Yeah, well, here in Texas, I think we know by now that we're very much on our own whenever some kind of natural disaster happens. We'll get some kind of aid, but we can't rely on our governor to help us a whole lot, and we can't rely on the president or the incoming president. I don't know. Well, maybe in Texas, maybe he might like us because he does like our governor. But, we have our own issues with the power grid, and that's actually kind of an issue right now as the temperatures are starting to drop here in Texas, and we all know what happens whenever the temperature drops in Texas. Also, all along the Ohio River Valley and the Northeast, up in New England, they're expecting some wintry weather going forward. So, this is only January, right? This is just the beginning of the year. They are predicting that weather-wise, it is going to be kind of a rough year, right? So Trump is getting inaugurated in just a couple of weeks. It's kind of scary. I mean, it is scary to think that, just the fact that anyone would be in that kind of a position of authority. It's not an authoritative position, though, right? He's in a role as a caretaker, right? Whenever you decide to become the president of the United States, you're saying, I'm responsible for all of these American people and all of these American interests abroad, at home, wherever. And Trump is just like, he's so selective about where he decides to help people, even though it's his job to help people. It's his job to deploy resources to areas like California, like Texas, like New England, whatever. And he just like shirks his responsibility all day long. And then these people, reelected him into office. So, and there are real life consequences whenever he does things like that, right? People suffer for it, and it is very sad. So,
okay, really fast, can I just mention? I got a message from my wife saying that apparently Bass has returned. She did rush back from her trip, so she is in the area as the recovery is continuing.
I know. I was getting like PTSD of Cancun cruise over here, reading that she was in Africa.
Yeah. Well, and at least she didn't head out after it happened like Cruz did.
That's true. Yeah, she was already there. She already had plans to be there. She was there for a presidential inauguration. So it was good of her to come back. Her tweet, though, was wildly unhelpful. I don't know. Did you find it helpful to you, John, in LA?
I mean, it's not going to do anything, but it's, I guess, the sort of thing that a politician does. I don't hate it. I mean, she rushed back. She's like doing the actual work is the part that's important. Social media isn't going to help. It can only potentially hurt. And Donald Trump, I think, gave us a lot of examples of that.
All right, so there are huge fires raging all over Los Angeles County, and the politicians responsible, whose jurisdictions are inside the affected areas, they are in a little bit of hot water for the situation that is unfolding. And we want to find out whether these gaffes that they purportedly are accused of making are real. Are they guilty? Are they not guilty? Is it a no-win situation? Because California politicians are under fire for these LA County fires. So let's start with Karen Bass, who is the mayor of Los Angeles. The first gaffe she's accused of, she was in Ghana when this all happened. She did fly back from Ghana, but she was in Ghana when the first the Palisades fire erupted, which has burned tens of thousands of acres and thousands of homes have been affected. But in her press conference, when she did arrive back, she had some trouble. She's being accused of kind of being a robot who also doesn't understand how the internet works. Here's a little excerpt from her press conference.
And as our firefighters do battle on the front lines, all of us must be vigilant. So if you receive an evacuation order, please leave immediately. If you receive a warning, get ready, protect yourself and protect each other, and don't divert firefighters from our strategy. Signals are out and the roads have debris. So stay off the roads unless you are evacuating or have another emergency. Be prepared, food, water, medicine, a bag packed and ready. Again, this is an active situation. But make no mistake, Los Angeles will rebuild stronger than ever. Right now, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL.
As we all know, she probably was supposed to read an actual URL that people who are frantically trying to find support could go to find that support that they so desperately request and desire and need. So that's the first gaffe. We're going to show another alleged gaffe and see what Cenk thinks about it. So the other situation that she's under fire for is she was being bird dogged, which is when someone who is trying to interview you kind of follows you around as you're going from one place to another. This is what it looked like, okay? And so we can't play the video from Sky News, but this is essentially the totality of Karen Bass's reaction. She just stood there in silence as a Sky News reporter asked her questions such as, and I'll just read it out to do a dramatic reenactment, do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department's budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Madam Mayor. Do you have anything to say? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Madam Mayor. Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens of today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them. Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home? Madam Mayor. And honestly, it's not much of an exaggeration to say that she just stood there while these questions were asked at her. So, Cenk, between the URL that she did not deliver, her robotic response to that, her lack of response to the Sky News reporter, guilty or not guilty, Karen Bass?
Oh, definitely guilty. But let's be fair about what she's guilty for or not, right? So for her being out of the city, a lot of people blame her. And what is she doing in Ghana in the first place? Blah blah blah. But I think that's so minor. There's no way in the world you could predict exactly when the fire was going to happen. So is the LA mayor never supposed to travel? So I just think that's the weakest, criticism of her. But then when you get to Sky News and URL, it isn't about the fire, but it is about leadership, and that is related to the fire. So first, Brett's reenactment was like 98% accurate. Not only was that exactly the questions, he read it from transcript, obviously, but she did not move. She never said anything. So what you saw there was really what happened. And it was super awkward. So why did she do that? Because establishment Democrats in America have been trained that the press is their lapdogs. And you don't have to talk to the press. And the press asking tough questions, how dare they, right? And so this is not just about Karen Bass. I've seen countless politicians, and honestly, these days, more Democrats react in that way because they expect, especially in Southern California, the press is 200% in their back pocket. They almost never get challenged. So she's got to be flummoxed by it. This is maybe one of the very, very rare times she's ever gotten a tough question, right? And so she thinks, I don't know you an answer. I don't know the voters an answer. And she's a corporate robot. So she doesn't know how to react to a live situation. So that's why she goes in and she reads her script in the press conference. And Burgundy will read anything that's in the prompter. And Burgundy in this case is all corporate politicians, which is like 90% of them, right? So she goes there and she's like, everyone go check out URL, right? Hey, you know what? After you make that mistake, maybe somebody whispers something and you come back and say the right site and say, hey, my bad, I just read that wrong. Like, people make mistakes. That's not the end of the world. But the fact that she is so robotic in her reaction because there is no leadership. Because look, guys, these standard corporate politicians are not picked for their ability to lead. They are picked for their ability to follow. Their job is to follow the orders of their donors. God damn it. And so, yes, we are.
I'm being told that there are news. It says disregard evacuation warning. It was for Kenneth Fire only.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, as we're doing this segment live, we get a perfect example of the incompetence of leadership in LA. Earlier in the show, the giant warning goes off. All of you heard it. It was an evacuation order. And so, I'm closer to the fires. So I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And then I find out it was for all of LA, which makes no sense because Brett doesn't live anywhere near the fires, right? So now they just said, here, I'll read it to you. Disregard last evacuation warning is for Kenneth Fire only. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Incompetence through and through. And I'm super proud that I voted against Karen Bass. There was enormous pressure to vote for her. How dare you? She's a Democrat. You have to vote for the Democrat. You have to vote for the one that the party has anointed. She is the anointed robot. Well, you anointed a robot, you got a robot. And the robot malfunctioned when there's an actual emergency and she needs to lead. She doesn't know how to speak. She doesn't say the right things. She doesn't know what to say. She doesn't know what to do. But most importantly, guys, how do you run out of water when there's massive, massive fires in LA nonstop? If I'm the mayor, and we'll get into this more, if I'm the mayor, when I come into office, I think, all right, we got homelessness, we got crime, we got wildfires, we got a certain set of things that are guaranteed issues in LA. How prepared are we for each of these? Did they do that? It certainly doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I have a fundamental disagreement on a couple things. I think that local news in Los Angeles and every local news organization absolutely is like, here is what we have to do today. We have to tell you everyone that's been remotely murdered or not murdered or everything. and they will always prefer to report like the juiciest crimes in your area. And that's like an uphill battle that every mayor, no matter Republican, Democrat, always has to fight. But the rest of it, but they never really typically link it as much as they have recently, as much to the local government as they have recently. So I think that's a slight difference. But you're always like, if it bleeds, it leads. That's always going to be the case in local news. The things that you're supposed to cover are actually, potholes and crime. Those are the two things you're supposed to do as a mayor, they typically say. And one of the biggest cuts to our city budget this go around was actually street services, which is weird. And I don't think the most responsible thing you could do. That said, like, there's a lot about this. She's not even my mayor. Like, there's pockets of Los Angeles where your mayor is not Karen Bass. Even though you tell people you live in LA, I'm one of them. But like, a lot of this has to do, I have seen reports that they haven't run out of water, but the things that are the problem that we can get into a little bit later are like, you have to cut off the electricity in order to not set more fires, but the electricity fuels the water pumps. And so then you have to delay as you bring generators to the water pumps in order to get the water flowing. So they didn't run out of water. There's water slow, but these are things that, like, I feel like if you are Karen Bass and you have been a national or a federal representative for so long, and then you come back kind of just to either kick your feet up and take it easy or kind of broaden your resume as you try to build up to a more senatorial campaign, these are things I definitely smell that sense of entitlement. I don't care what letters in front of your name. And you're seeing, like, a lot of what I've seen in Karen Bass in these press conferences is her just being in over her head because it's crazy. And it gives you that feeling of when they first told George W. Bush in his ear that the planes hit the World Trade Center, and you just sit there for 8 minutes. She sat there for 16 hours and she flew back from Ghana. And I agree that she's not necessarily guilty for that, for being in Ghana. But like, she did say the people here have it under control. I think in these scenarios, everybody's so upset that, and rightfully so, that you want to blame someone. I just think like these moments that are created are being overblown by the media to kind of create this sense that they're doing horrible, horrible things. And it's just like the banal incompetence that comes with running a big city, that I don't care whoever has run these cities. There's always a problem in Los Angeles with homelessness. There's always been fires that come through, and we could talk about that more. But that's just my general take on the Karen Bass of it all. And again, not my mayor.
Yeah. So, Brett, before you go on, because there's so much to the story, but I just want to comment on the things that you said. Brett's totally right about almost everything he said there, in my opinion. So, yeah, local crime gets reported by local news nonstop. That's definitely true. Very rarely do they then say, in my opinion, but Brett might know better because he might watch it more, and Karen Bass did this or did not do this, et cetera. Usually, like, in my experience, I've never seen local press criticize any mayor. Or any governor. Like, they're just, except when Arnold was in charge, because he was a Republican, they would criticize him from time to time, right? And so, and number two, everything Brett said about Karen Bass is exactly what I'm worried about. And it's literally in my tweets and in my videos about why I voted against her, right? Banal incompetence, that's the perfect description of Karen Bass. And I don't want my mayor to have banal incompetence. The George W. Bush example is a perfect one. Like, when he's like in over his head and he's like, oh no, I don't know how to react to this. And remember, George Bush was picked because the donors thought that he would be more compliant than John McCain. So they're picking for compliance and obedience. That's why you never get leadership. And finally, that sense of entitlement. I don't have to answer a reporter's questions. I don't have to do anything. That's why she's probably flummoxed right now. Like, what is with all this criticism? How dare they? And so that's why, by the way, at a press conference today, she was like, she called for unity under the guise of, oh, we are unifying for LA citizens. No. That's a way of saying, don't criticize me. And if you do, I'm going to pretend that it's your fault that we're not responding well to the fires because you hurt unity. Get the hell out of here.
Gavin Newsom has been accused of one gaffe and then triumphantly celebrated for fighting against Donald Trump in basically the same breath. So let's go through both of those things. The governor of California is in the news for right now. We'll start with what he's been accused of, which is kind of shifting the blame to local folks. Here he is asked about water shortages in Los Angeles during the fires.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in Palisades, it ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter on this block. They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's going to be determined by the local.
So there he is showing up for the photo op in Altadena, which is a completely different fire from like the rich folks area. That's like the small town, northern outskirts area. And he's being accused of kind of crapping on the local people from that clip. We'll talk about that, but also punching up. Now, Donald Trump accused Gavin Newsom of being at fault for all of the fires in all of Los Angeles because, as Donald Trump said, Newsom didn't sign the, I want to get this right, Water Restoration Declaration, sending water from NorCal to SoCal. And I can get into some of the details of that in a second, namely that declaration just literally doesn't exist. But here is Newsom's response when asked by Anderson Cooper.
I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, people are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't. I stood next to a president of the United States of America today, and I was proud to be with Joe Biden. And he had the backs of every single person in this community. He didn't play politics, didn't try to divide any of us.
So there you go. Cenk, reactions to the accusations that he's kind of blaming local folks, and then how he handled the Trump accusation.
Yeah, terrible all around. So why does he blame local folks? Because he's trying to avoid responsibility. And by the way, it's a super bad look. So like people get mad at me when I criticize Democrats. Are you going to get mad at Gavin Newsom? Because he just threw Karen Bass right under that bus. Okay. And second of all, he didn't have any answers. So you're the governor. Look, I get it. It's tough. And by the way, the winds are extreme. And this fire would have been super tough to fight even if you had a perfect mayor and a perfect governor. But instead of giving any substantive answer, he deflected to blaming local Democrats as opposed to himself. And that gives you a sense of the kind of leader he is, or lack of leadership. And then I've got to also point out Anderson Cooper's beginning to that question was perfect, because he said, I hate to even have to ask you. I mean, you're a beloved corporate Democrat. Understand that it gives me great pain to ask you a semi-tough question, which is not even tough. It's a softball. Donald Trump made up a thing to blame you for. Can you then answer the easiest question in the world? But even then, he's like, I beseech you. I apologize. I bow to you before I ask you this question. The temerity I have to ask questions as a reporter. So that tells you all you need to know about mainstream media. Anyways, then you get to his answer on Trump. He's politicizing this. That's what every coward politician does whenever there's a tragedy. Oh, don't politicize this. You guys know who does that the most, right? Republicans when there's a mass shooting or a school shooting. Oh, no, don't politicize this. Don't politicize this. Thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Now, when people are affected by this, and they might be angry enough to ask for change. You want to do change? No. Let's wait until they forget. And that way we won't have to do change. So, no, spare me that nonsense about, he's politicizing. Brother, you're a politician. He's a politician. So don't tell me about it. Not answering the question is politicizing it. So I barf every time I hear these politicians going, oh, I don't want to politicize it because I'd like to avoid political responsibility. He's so unbearable.
Yeah, I'd say many things are true. One, that the CNN thing, absolutely. Like, there is no bigger, like, affinity, to put it nicely, than mainstream media's love of Gavin Newsom. I understand why, as I responded to one of Anna's tweets. The reason is because he looks like he could sexually gratify many people at once. Like, that is literally where he gets it from. In terms of his, and that's, like, gross, but it's true. But, like, he's definitely better at that than Karen Bass. Just proving he's not robotic. He's doing the thing. But with me and Gavin Newsom, it's like he is a better leader. And he's a very talented candidate. And that's most of what I want that I don't get with national politicians on the Democratic side. And he also, like, made insulin for people. These are things that he knows he has to do, that he does publicly, and maybe it's like Stockholm Syndrome, but it's like, I am grateful that he does actually do some stuff, and maybe they're just crumbs that he's throwing to progressives, but he does throw some crumbs to progressives, though I know there are a lot of different issues with him. The other thing is, like, this is, as an Angelino for 5 generations, like, my great-grandfather was a key grip on Gunsmoke. Like, that is how long we've been in Los Angeles. My grandfather was the Malibu locksmith. And, like, he moved because fire. He lived in Hollywood, moved to, played when you could do all that stuff financially as a locksmith, and then moved out because of fire and landslides. And that is what happens in that area. And these are, like, typically the Santa Ana winds peak at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. Everything I'm going to say at the end of it is, like, the first thing people say, yeah, I know it's a really intense fire. Like, that's a huge thing. Yes, this is a giant thing. And no matter how many people you had, like, literally the only way you could put out these flames is if you had a giant dam you could break instantly, because you had high winds that you can't fly planes over. Though I know in the wake of this, we'll find a bunch of incompetent. I've already mentioned incompetence, and I've mentioned a bunch of it earlier, where, like, there are a lot of systems, like, shutting down power is necessary. Also necessary, having power so you can run the pumps to get the water out. And there is no backup generator. You have to bring that into place. Like, that's a problem. We should change the system in order to fix that. And what are the results? Well, how is LA doing? I just want to say the Sunset Fire, the Sunswept Fire in Studio City, the Woodley Fire. These are all smaller fires that kind of broke out and got 100% contained. Many of them in the valley and the hills. Palisades fires, at least, and these were all taken at a snapshot. Maybe some have reignited, but 17,000 acres burned, 0% contained. Eaton Fire, which is the one in Altadena, which is northeast by the Rose Bowl, that is 0% contained at 10,000 acres. The Hearst Fire is 855 acres and 10% contained, and the Lydia Fire, 40% contained. And then there's a new one that just broke out near Calabasas that they're trying to fly people around on. But there are dozens and dozens of planes flying around, and we'll find out more. The big thing that people had talked about before we go to break, and Cenk, I'll give you a chance to comment on this, is a lot of folks are talking about the cuts to the fire department. Karen Bass had a $17.5 million cut to the fire department. That amounts to 2% of the previous year's budget. It was cut by. There's a lot of people trying to rebut this, and they're saying, like, a lot of it was one-time purchases that we had to make last year that we don't have to make this year, and other things are like cuts to the fire department's salary. And so that's kind of a little bit of background there. But Cenk, final thoughts on this story before we take a break.
Yeah, it's just complete lack of preparation in every regard. Could there be a fire in the Palisades? That would be one of the first places that I would expect that there would be a fire, right? Because of its positioning in LA. Like, most of the fires start in that Malibu, Calabasas area. That's because there's more, forest area there, and then it jumps into the houses that are nearby. So for that entire area would be my top priority. Oh, hey, it turns out we don't have enough water in the fire hydrants for a fire, or it's going to take longer to bring up the water pressure. These are things that I would hopefully have thought of and planned out. And maybe you can't do it for every area of LA. I get it, and it might be too tough a standard. But you at least, I got no reassurance that they were ready for this. So it seemed like panic from minute one to right now, right? And so we just kept getting in the news, the fires are 0% contained, 0% contained. And then there was another fire and another fire. And at some point last night, there was 4 to 5 fires. I started to lose count. So my sister's sending me a picture of a giant fire coming over the Hollywood Hills. I've got a giant fire to the north of us, and on it goes. Then a friend of mine called and said, my wife's best friend's house is gone. The guy we play basketball, his house is gone. The guy we play poker with, his house is gone. And he started to worry that the fires are going to converge and consume all of LA. So in a situation like that, whoever's in charge, and in this case the mayor, has to come out. What I would have done is given an endless number of updates. I would have told people, look, guys, here's the situation. And I would have told them the bad news, and I would have told them whatever is the good news, and I would have given them updates. Like, no, it's a real fire. It's super serious. So if you're in the Palisades, you got to get out of there. Listen to our evacuation orders, et cetera, et cetera. But guys, if you're in this area, don't panic. We'll let you know. And the minute that there's a new fire, I'd get out there and I'd say, here's what's happening. Here's what you need to do. And just have a firm control of the situation and make sure that the citizens don't panic and that they get to safety and that they know that there's someone in charge who's doing it exactly right. Instead, we have, now, if you have problems, go to our URL. Jesus Christ, man. Banal incompetence. And when you're in the middle of a giant natural disaster, banal incompetence doesn't cut it. It doesn't come within a million miles of cutting it. This was an epic disaster. Yesterday, Karen Bass lost her re-election. Look, every neighborhood app is on fire, sorry for the analogy, of F Karen Bass. Like the loathing of Karen Bass is now at a peak because she is deeply incompetent and doesn't care. Meanwhile, I read Politico, a story about her. Oh my God. They're like, she has incredible experience and leadership, and the people of LA love her, but this is a slight blip. Oh, just shut up already, mainstream media. Jesus Christ, man. So, no, she's a goner, and she should be.
And that strip of Palisades up through, anyways, I don't know, people north of Montana, like that whole area, Santa Monica, that is like prime fundraiser areas for Democratic politicians, nationally and locally. Anyways, we did some polls on YouTube and Twitch, and both said that Karen Bass, and it was guilty or not guilty, Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, and they came back pretty overwhelmingly guilty, 70% for Karen Bass and 80% for Gavin Newsom.
So who else is running things? This right here, ladies and gentlemen, this is the leadership of the LA Fire Department. I sure hope they know what they're doing.
Did you hear that? That's what we call a dog whistle. It's pretty loud. It's Jesse Waters taking the opportunity to seize on a tragedy in Los Angeles, which is the enemy of him. You know, those big blue cities like the one he lives in, and then just say that DEI is the reason that there is trouble or failure or anything like that. There's more people that agree with him, and we'll play you some of those clips of the insanity when they're trying to find the DEI boogeyman and blame it for the fires in Los Angeles. But here's more of what Jesse Waters had to say.
So while her department was sending equipment to Ukraine, the chief was marching in pride parades, which is fine. Have all the pride you want, but you better make sure you're ready to do your job when it counts. LA County Fire Department fired a ton of men who refused to get vaccinated. Bet they could have used those men today. In fact, California has a program to scrub white males from the fire department.
There you go. There are many allegations there from Jesse Waters, but, you know, he really boils it down to she's a woman lesbian. DEI is one of the arrows in my very lazy quiver of right-wing news. I'm going to shoot it in what I would describe as an attempt at an Overton wormhole, where you just try to say something ridiculous and suck people into it so they'll talk about that instead of the fires you should hope people should be saved from. But Cenk, what's your take?
Yeah, so this is why people get repelled from the right wing. What the hell was that with the picture? All he did was put up the picture and go, "It's the LA Fire Department. Look, they're women. Of course, we all hate women. They're totally incompetent. They can't do anything." And that's the assumption, right? Why? So what's the problem that they're women? Look, guys, if you want to say, hey, you have to have the same standards for men and women, and this is an important physical job, and they need to be able to carry people out of the building, totally agree, okay? You shouldn't relax the standards, etc. But he didn't say any of that, and you don't know anything about those women. All you saw was a picture of women, and Jesse Waters was like, I think my case is proved. No, what's proved is that you're a sexist prick, right? That's the only thing that you proved. And it's by definition, because he didn't say anything that was particular to them. He didn't say anything that they did wrong. It was just like women, obviously incompetent. I mean, I don't know how women watch that show. It's crazy. How do you watch that and go, oh yeah, we're totally incompetent. We shouldn't be hired for that. Yeah, he's totally right. It's maddening. And then, so look, guys, there's so many. We just did a giant segment on what Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom did wrong. It is a target-rich environment. You could talk about the water. You could talk about the lack of preparation. You could talk about this. And they're like, oh, DEI. It's minority and female problem. No. That's why people don't want to vote for Republicans, because you say crap like that.
It's just so stupid. Yeah, I agree. It's just stupid. There's one thing I know for sure is that Jesse Waters doesn't know anything about fighting fires. And he doesn't care to know. He does know what his job is. He doesn't know about her job. He just knows that she's a lesbian, and his job is to say something, problem, something, blue city, something else, DEI, lesbian, pride, and white people are disenfranchised. Here's a look. Let's go to graphic 2. Here's a look at a pretty basic cross-section of the LA County Fire Executive Board. If I were as lazy and stupid as Jesse Waters, I'd say, what is it with white men in the LA County Executive Board that are lighting LA County on fire? How dare these white men do that? And there are people who say stuff as dumb as that. But like, that's just not how any of this works. I agree with Cenk. There's many, it's a target-rich environment, and there's many things that if you give a crap about the issue, if you give a crap about the problems, if you, Jesse Waters, New Yorker, who gets someone to drive him from his house to his job where he less than works for less than 2 hours a day, like, you have to understand, Jesse, that you live in a bubble and you are just completely oblivious to the real problems in the world. And that's it. It's just lazy. It's just stupid. But that's what the Republican Party does. It's what they do in league with each other, in league with Fox News. They just repeat nonsense. And that's the role that it plays in their voters and their viewers' lives. They just want you to connect the dots with them. Even if those dots aren't connected, he just brings out his big stupid marker and goes, fire, and connects it to the same stupid dot that he lays out there.
Yeah. So look, guys, this is identity politics.
Yeah.
Not only do you have a world of legitimate ways to criticize Democrats in a blue city in this case, right? Which we just did on the earlier story. And then on top of that, you could actually talk about the donor class and how the Resnicks have taken an enormous amount of water from California and have donated to Democrats, and the Democrats made deals with them. And maybe we could have used that water. Like, that's a super legitimate, interesting conversation to have where you're still criticizing Democrats. But then that involves the donor class, and Fox News doesn't like that. So they're not going to criticize that. Instead, they're going to distract you with identity politics and culture wars. And talk about lesbians. What does lesbians have to do with a fire? Are you guys mental? And guys, this is the most old, tired trick that Republicans have. Create wedge issues that create wedges between us and distract people from the real problems. So here, I want to play the Dave Rubin clip here. And after Dave, we'll show you Laura Ingraham doing it in a different way. They're all obsessed with DEI and blah, 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 and trying to distract you and get you to hate gay people for no reason in the middle of this fire. It's so insane. So when you need someone as cover to hate gay people, what do? You find a turncoat who is gay and will tell you that the real problem is gay people. I present to you from several years ago, Dave Rubin.
PG&E strikes me as almost a metaphor for the destruction of the state. So here's the utility, which doesn't really know anything about its own infrastructure, but knows everything about the race of its employees. How did we get there? Yes.
The problem right now is that everything from academia to public utilities to politics, everything that goes woke, that buys into this ridiculous progressive ideology, that cares about what contractors are LGBT or how many black firemen we have or white this or Asian that. Everything that goes that road eventually breaks down. It is not how freedom is supposed to operate. What is supposed to happen, Tucker, imagine if your house was on fire. Would you care what the public utility or what the fire company, what contractor they brought in, what gender or sexuality or any of those things he or she was? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Who would care?
And right now we've got a situation. Of course you wouldn't care.
So there he is. It's worried about the sexuality of the firefighters. No, brother, they're worried about did they get enough goodies to their donors? They're distracted. They don't care much about the voters. There's a billion ways that you can criticize them without dragging the sexuality of the firefighters into it. But well played to bring in someone from the LGBT community to throw the LGBTQ community under the bus. But these days, in the second Trump term, they don't even have to bother doing that. Jesse Waters will just do it and be brazen about it.
Yep. And following through on Cenk's promise, here is Scott Jennings and Leo Terrell blaming DEI for the LA fires. Take a look.
It's poor management on the part of the Democrats. They do not look at fire prevention, what you said, basic forestry as a priority. It's climate change. It's EV mandates. It's preventing oil drilling. It's DEI, that DEI, which is so sickening. What does DEI have to do with putting out fires? But you got a city fire chief who thinks DEI is the #1 issue. It's insulting.
Also in California, you might have recall a news story from last year. There was some interest in the fire departments and the firefighters in California. And the interest was that there were too many white men who were firefighters, and we need to have a program in California to make sure we don't have enough white men as firefighters. So we have DEI, we have budget cuts, and yet I'm wondering now, if your house is burning down, how much do you care what color the firefighters are?
And then moving on, here is Laura Ingraham calling Biden's Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, a DEI hire.
We wanted to build more dams and raise it up. California continues to grow, and we built no new dams with all new population.
Oh, he got rid of 4 dams. He did the big ceremony with the tribal leaders. Deb Haaland, we got to call her out, too, because she's the Interior Secretary, another DEI hire of the Biden administration. I'm sure she's a lovely person. She is completely incompetent. Completely incompetent.
That is, I mean, it's just so lazy because they're not saying what she did that is incompetent. They're not saying that here is an example of a firefighter who should not have the job, and that makes them incompetent, and then connecting those dots. They just are so lazy that they just say it again and again and again. And the first time they say it, you don't really notice it. You're like, oh, that's stupid. But 3 weeks, 3 months, 10 years later, however, that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Dave Rubin said that. They're just saying the same thing, and you've essentially been groomed to accept it as a Fox News viewer.
Yeah, so let's break it down one by one. Do you know what program they're referring to? They're referring to a program in Marin County, which is in Northern California, that ran for 1 year that said, hey, maybe we should have minority and women firefighters as well. So that apparently lit a DEI firestorm that affected all the way down to Southern California many years later. It's beyond absurd. It's beyond absurd. And then, if they focused on that, the one thing they said there that was legitimate is the dams. Okay, let's get into a debate on whether we should have built the dams or not. That's policy. That's interesting. And that's a good conversation about should we have built those dams? Should we have not? What are the factors there? but they hate the substance, and they're trying to drive a wedge between us. So that brings us to Deb Haaland. Are you guys kidding me? What is this? So everyone who's a minority is DEI? No, I'll tell you why Deb Haaland was hired. Because they needed a progressive in the cabinet, and she was the only progressive that they put in the cabinet, and so they put her in Interior Secretary, which is, let's be honest, not one of the major four, right? So it was actually like a little, throw in for the progressives. It had nothing to do with that it was DEI. It had nothing to do with the race or gender. There's tons of females. What are we not supposed to put females in the cabinet? Are we never allowed to put a Native American in the cabinet because then it becomes by definition a DEI hire? So every minority is now DEI, period. And then you wonder why people call you racist. Guys, look, Republicans catch tons of feelings, and does the left overdo it? Do they see, like when people? I fight on this, right? When some on the left say all 77 million voters for Trump are racist, I say that's ridiculous, totally, utterly ridiculous. But then when you have their people in media, their hosts going around going, Native American DEI, Black DEI, woman DEI, gay DEI. Okay, what you're saying is I hate you all. So it's not, as Brett said in the beginning, it's not a dog whistle. It's a bullhorn. And so show me what they did wrong. I just showed you in the first segment what Karen Bass did wrong, what Gavin Newsom did wrong. Hold both sides accountable. DEI hires. Okay, well, they even said it about Karen Bass, but she got elected. So what did the voters do a DEI hire? Well, okay, then according to that dumbass logic, is Trump a DEI hire? Because older white men overwhelmingly voted for Trump. So I guess they wanted a DEI president that represented them. Two can play at this dumbass game. And this is exactly what identity politics and culture wars look like. Don't worry about the fire. Don't worry about what caused it. Just blame people based on their ethnicity, their race, their gender. I despise it.
Yep. It's like, I want to say it's annoying, but it's just nefarious. And it's both of those things at the same time. And and the other thing they do is just kind of say, if I feel like the rule should be for all of us. Once they start saying things like DEI, once they start bringing up stuff like transports, it is just, or talking about anything to do with tariffs, it is just a distraction. The answer to that is probably they're trying to distract from some economic issue that their entrenched power uses to benefit themselves and wants to split you up and have you argue with other people for no goddamn reason, so that you won't come for them because they have the power. And you need to look no further than the actual laws they put in place, the actual tax code shifts that they make when they do have the power, which disproportionately always invariably benefit the rich.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We could be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.